Welcome to the Stage Analysis Members Weekend video, Sunday the 24th of July. And so tonight we've got a fair bit to get through again. It's been an interesting week in the market. We've got lots of earnings coming up in the coming week. I'm going to start tonight's video with a look at the Semiconductors group with an in focus on the actual group. I think there's lots about a quarter of the group is reporting earnings in the upcoming week, and it's shown some strong relative strength over the last 3 weeks or so. One of the groups that's been coming up the most in the watchlist scans. We're going through the major indexes, sectors, industry relative strength tables, and what's been moving in those, as well as I'm going to go through the earnings watch list for the week with some of the key stocks in focus later on in the video, as well as the key market breadth indicators that we follow. So starting tonight, we'll have a look. We'll start with an in focus on the semiconductors group. So this is the SMH, so one of the ETFs that tracks the group. There are others that you can use, but this one's a reasonably good proxy I've found. See, we've been in stage 4 now since we broke out into stage 4 around this point here. So I think we're around 15 weeks into a stage 4 decline now. You can see we're in this declining trend channel at the moment, and this week managed to close back above that 10-week moving average, although it's still below a declining 30-week moving average at the moment. So we remain in stage 4 at the moment. Potential small change of behaviour going on with the relative strength, but we haven't yet had a definitive change of behaviour. You can see from the length of these swings that the current move, although strong, hasn't really broken what we saw on the previous swing. So in order to be a change of behaviour, we'd want to see a stronger move that potentially breaks that declining 30-week moving average and then starts to consolidate around it again. So potentially moving around it at that point. So at this point in here, we potentially could mark this as a selling climax, an automatic rally, and a secondary test and a potential start of a base structure. But we're not there yet. It's, as I said, we've got earnings coming up this week for at least a quarter of the group. So it's going to be a big week for the semiconductors group overall. You can see relative strength wise, had a strong period versus the S&P 500. So the zero line is the line that measures relative to the S&P 500, which is the 52-week moving average of that. So you can see it's closing in back on the S&P 500, but it's still underperforming over the last 6 months or so since it started to drop below the zero line there. We drop down to the daily time frame. You can see this declining channel a little bit more clearly. So we've had a little bit of spring type action at the bottom of the channel at the moment. You can see a spring attempt through here with a higher low test and then some follow through, starting to make some higher lows and higher highs in the short term since the start of July, since we had that shakeout at the start of the month with many of the semiconductor stocks that had been holding up in stage 3 actually attempting to break down into stage 4, but then immediately reversing back into the range with spring type moves. So there's been some good action with some of those where they've managed to hold up much more convincingly than other stocks. As I've said on previous videos, if we go back to the overall weekly chart here, you can see the kind of price action we've had with the strong stage 2 advance and the head and shoulders stage 3 top that we saw here. The pullback has been relatively shallow compared to what we've seen in some other areas such as software and some of the growth stocks, for example. So what we're looking for in the stage analysis method, we're not looking for this type of behavior where it gives it all back up again, we lose 60-70% and it comes back down again. The percentage moves can still be big, but you don't really want to give up the entire previous stage 2 advance. What we're actually looking for on a stage 4 decline is after a strong stage 2 advance and small stage 3 top, you're looking for a shallower stage 4 decline, which then starts to base and then has a much easier route back to new highs again. So we're looking for this kind of pattern, which a lot of the semiconductor stocks are showing and have been showing for a while compared to a lot of other groups. So as these can then obviously have much easier path to new highs. So As you can see, as I said in the daily chart, it's back above the 50-day moving average here. We need to get the moving averages back in the right order low. So in the short term, the 200-day moving average is still above the 50-day moving average and still above the 21-day exponential there. So these are in the wrong order at the moment. We need to get the 21 back above and then the 50 and then the 200. So still remains in a downtrend overall, as you can see from the trend channel, but we're looking for that change of behavior. So if earnings are well received this week in multiple semiconductor stocks, then potentially we could get that breakthrough up through that 200-day moving average and then potentially start to consolidate around it in some way, shape or form. Ideally, you wouldn't want to see it fall much back into the range at that point, but potentially could start to form a higher base structure at some point. So that's what we're looking for at the moment. We look into the individual stocks in the group. So at the moment, this is ordered by relative strength. So you can see QUIK is currently the top in terms of relative strength, followed by SKYT, PLAB, AEHR, which had a really strong week, and then ON, TSEM, ACLS, etc. So at the moment this week, as I said, we've got now this really useful feature on stock charts now, which they only added on Thursday, I believe, where you can now actually see the next earnings date in the summary view. So you can actually sort the chart by the earnings date and see what's going on. So you can see this week we've got multiple stocks in the group here, around 25 or so, actually reporting earnings in the coming week. So with the varying differences in the SETR scores there, and small, mid and large caps. So we go back to let's go through some of the strongest relative strength stocks in the group and have a look at what's actually been going on in the individual stocks. So a number of these have been coming up in the watch list scans. So definitely an area of interest at the moment. So we look at QUIK. You can see potentially this one is in stage 2 at the moment. Had a moved down to stage 2 and failed at this point in here, and came back in again and started forming a broader base structure, moving from 3 back to stage 1 again and then breaking back out into stage 2. So it's been in stage 2 for a few months now. So by far one of the strongest stocks in the group. If we go to the daily on this quickly, you can see at the moment attempting to break through this short-term structure, but potentially could start to pull back in a little bit, maybe some VCP type action before potentially moving higher, or it could obviously fail at this point. If it can't manage to make a higher high there, we could obviously see a break down in this one. SKYT here moving into early stage 1. So some people might obviously tell you this is stage 2. It's not. You've still got a declining 30-week moving average here. We're still underneath various levels of resistance in here. This is a change of behavior. So you can see a selling climax with some spring type action there that's rallied up into an automatic rally, secondary test, and although it's rallied out of the range here, the sudden sharp move on heavy volume, it's still below this declining 30-week moving average. So it can't actually be in stage 2 yet. It's far too early. So this will likely end up forming a much broader range. If we drop down onto the daily candles here, you can see the sharp advance that this has had on this increasing volume here. You can see the extreme move in volume this week as it's run up into that 200-day moving average. So we'll be looking for this to consolidate potentially and hold, if it does pull back, to hold above the previous high in the previous range. So it's got multiple levels of resistance support there. So you'd want to see it hold in this kind of 9 to 13 area potentially if it does start to pull back. PLAB has been a really volatile one, another one that's in stage 2 potentially here after this. Had this really strong move which broke it out, but then it pulled back into the range again and has been really quite sloppy on its behavior. So really difficult one. So it had that strong move there, as you can see on the daily chart. So we pull that across here. You can see the kind of high handle type behavior it's been forming. So at the moment, breaking a near-term level above just around the plus 2 ATR level. So you want to see this start to consolidate in the upper part of the range and tighten up a bit. AEHR. So this week had a change of behavior. This has come up in the watch list a number of times recently. So this was a really strong move this week. You can see moving back above the 0 line here this week. So marking this as a change of behavior from the stage 4 decline. So potentially this is the start of early stage 1, so what we would call stage 1A. You can see it's broken a lower base structure in here, but again, it's still below a declining 30-week move, just above a declining 30-week moving average here. So this will need to potentially form a higher base. So with this massive bar that we formed this week, it's potentially going to need to form in this kind of range, ideally not falling too far back into the prior range. Again, if we drop down to the daily time frame on this one, you can see that huge move that it had. If I mark this out a little bit, you can see some levels in here, the original stage 4 breakdown level in there. So there's your original stage 4 breakdown attempt there. And then it's moved up. We formed this lower base structure. And it's been grinding, a little bit of up thrust action, and then a spring and higher low test and follow through. And it's now had a sign of strength rally up here into the 200-day moving average. So looking for this to now hold in this upper range between the 10 and 13 level ideally, and start to consolidate within that range. ON, another one reporting. I think this one is reporting this week. Let me just go to single summary. Nope, the week after this one reports. So this one's coming up on earnings, but this has shown some really strong relative strength through the stage 4 decline in the market. As you can see, it's managed to hold up in stage 3 during the stage 4 decline in the market. You can see the range that's formed here. Had a little bit of a spring, started to make that breakdown at the start of the month here, and rallied back up again. So spring type action in here, following the buying climax, automatic reaction, secondary tests. So it's made a spring at the pivotal point here at the stage 4 breakdown level, and then rallied back above its 30-week moving average there. So currently potentially a small change of behavior, but it's back in the range. So remains in stage 3 at the moment until there's a more definitive change of behavior that could potentially move it back to stage 1 again. So we drop down onto a lower time frame here. If I get the ATR levels off, you see a little bit more clearly. So you can see the lower structure that's formed in here. So a little bit of a terminal shakeout type spring where it's rallied back in, higher low test in here, and then it's followed through strongly through the 200-day moving average here. So at the moment, you want to see this hold in the upper half of the range, potentially consolidate in this area up here before tightening up and moving up and out. So potentially could have an earnings gap up if it in the coming weeks, but or a gap back down again. So we don't know until we get earnings. So this one is looking interesting from obviously a perspective of the structure of and the fact that it's held up in stage 3 for the vast majority of the market stage 4 decline. So TSEM, this one not so convinced on in terms of the actual. We had this huge move here. It's making the kind of behavior that you see with stocks that are buyout type candidates. So we need to look more into that one. So I'm not sure if there was some news at this point that has made it obviously grind sideways for that period of time. So that one needs more further investigation. ACLS, another one that held up in stage 3 for the vast majority of the market decline. You can see this stage 4 breakdown attempt in here, which has failed and rallied back up through the range again. So we've got a little bit of double top action going on at the moment. So you may need to pull in a little bit, but looking for a change of behavior and run up towards the top of the range following the spring. So following a spring, the expectation is obviously for a run out of the range, back up type action before obviously moving on to new highs. So if this is a spring and this is moving into phase D, then the expectation would be for a sign of strength rally. So if we don't get a sign of strength rally and it starts to falter and rolls back over again, then this one could obviously decline potentially into stage 4. MPWR, so this is another one that's come up in the watch list a few times. Again, been consolidating mostly in the stage 3 range. It has dropped down into stage 4, but it's been sort of flirting between 3 and 4 for many, many months now. So forming this lower structure within this broader structure that we've got up here. So this lower structure, obviously, as it declined into stage 4, it's been grinding sideways. You can see the moving average, the 10-week moving average is just coming back up towards the 30-week moving average. Managed to get a close above the 30-week moving average this week. Relative strength slightly outperforming what's going on in the actual stock itself. So again, this one, we're looking for some kind of sign of strength that pushes it out of this range, potentially back up towards the highs, and then for some kind of higher consolidation to develop. So again, if it can't do that and we get a gap down move on earnings, then potentially could make a run for into stage 4 more convincingly. LSCC, another one of interest at the moment. Again, moving from a small, shallow stage 4 decline. You can see it's had a big stage 2 run up, smaller stage 3, and only a shallow stage 3 into stage 4. So looking for this to continue up and out on earnings, potentially for a gap up out of the range. But this would be a good idea with all of the earnings results coming up. You should there's a few good sites where you need to check the implied volatility and see how much the potential gap in either direction could be, especially if you already own the stock. So looking at this one again for a potential change of behavior, we've got some spring type action in here, breaking out of this lower structure that's formed. If I drop down onto the daily time frame here, again you can see the broader structure. So I'll take this across, you can see this bigger structure that's been forming, and then you can see this lower structure in here, fractal structure of a spring type action and higher low tests. So again, if I drop even lower down, go down to the 4-hour time frame, you'll be able to see that a bit more clearly. So you can do stage analysis on multiple time frames, and it's a really useful way to fine tune your entry points. You can see the stage 4 decline in here starts to drift into stage 1. So if I mark this out, you've got your selling climax in here into potential automatic rally up here, secondary test areas. So forming that stage 1 base structure, a little bit of a local spring type action, as well as a proper spring in there as it touched. So spring number 3 for a high low test, last point of support, and breaking up and through. So potential area where you could have got an early entry point within the range. Obviously this is now a sign of strength rally out of the range. So expectation is for it to hold above the structure that it's formed. So we've got a stage 2 breakout on this lower time frame here. So you'd want to see this hold in this kind of area and tighten up potentially, and then start to make a attempt to continue on. ADI is another one. Again, spring type action with only a shallow stage 4 decline in here, moving from stage 3 into a more shallow stage 4, a little bit spring type action again, moving up. So again, looking for a break up and out that then manages to hold and continue on. So if it gaps down, this one could make a deeper stage 4 decline. So, and then AEIS, this one not looking so good. I don't like the amount of resistance in that one. There's a lot of overhead in that one. So SEMO, a little bit of cup and handle pattern on this. A cup and handle type pattern that's been forming on this one since the start of the year. So 6 months cup and handle, but this price action in here has been a little bit sloppy. So need to see this tighten up, potentially form you can see a little shoulder in here and a head. So potentially this could if it can form a higher move in here, then could form a little inverse head and shoulders within this sort of broader head and shoulder cup and handle pattern. So again, if it breaks to the downside here and starts to move below, then potentially could make a full-on stage 4 decline. So it will all depend on what goes on earnings. So GSIT much further down in stage 4, so that would be a no-no. KLAC, another one of interest. So this one, again, spring type action, looking for a sign of strength rally out of the range. So, but again, if it gaps, this could make a deeper stage 4 decline. So if we drop down to the daily time frame on this one, you can see that structure more clearly. Got the original level for the stage 4 breakdown in here, but then formed this broader range across here, and then we've got this spring here, which has then had a high low test and followed through, and then obviously early entry points through here, potentially looking for this to follow through up and out of the range. And as I said, the expectation at that point is for it to hold and then follow through. Obviously, if you have a move up into here and it starts to fall back into the range immediately, then that is an up thrust after distribution and potentially an area to get short. So Onto, another one at the top of the channel here. So again, hasn't had a much of a stage 4 decline here. A little bit of spring type action in the near term. Again, similar to the rest of the group, so looking for a follow-through move up and out in this one. An expert, again, not so good. Big stage 4 decline relative to the others, so we'll take that one. CEVA, again, not a good decline there. That one would be an avoid. AXTI, again, potentially still late stage 4 with a deep decline, so that one's no good either. CAN, no good. So, and on to, so there are many more, but I won't go through all of them. I don't want to, we're already 20 minutes into the video, so I think that's a good place to stop on the semiconductors group. So hopefully you can go into, you can, in stock charts, you can create, or your own software, you can go in, create your own chart list, obviously look for when the earnings are and make your own, and go through the entire group and look for the ones showing the best strength and what that have earnings coming up in the next week. As I said, about 25 or so got earnings in the coming week, so plenty to watch from this group, and obviously one of the strongest groups in the near term with the most, I think, on the IBD industry groups, they have the most stocks on point of figure buy signals this week. So it's been coming up in the watch list a lot, whereas obviously other groups, there's not been a lot of group strength over the last few weeks since the biotech started to top out in the near term. So that one's definitely an area of interest.